Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Able United 101. My name is Rachel Fackender, and I serve as the spokesperson for Able United, Florida's qualified ABLE program. I'm also joined by Able United Director John Finch. John.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to hopefully giving you a deep dive on ABLE accounts and that you'll take a lot of good information away for you and your practice.
Absolutely. We'd like to kick off today's call by thanking the Academy of Elder Law Attorneys for collaborating with us on this very important topic that really has the opportunity to impact thousands of Floridians with disabilities. And again, we also want to thank all of you for taking time out of your Wednesday to be with us for this free CLE opportunity. And before we dive right into the presentation, we'd like to open up the floor to Mr. Grady Williams to say a few words.
Yes, welcome, Rachel. Welcome, John. We're delighted to have you with us today. We look forward to doing more things with Able United in the future, and we're so happy you could join us. I wanted to tell the AFELA attendees to please check out the Able United website, and also please check out the Able United social media. I love their messaging. It's very positive. It's very to the point, and I think that it will put a smile on your face in addition to informing you. So without further ado, thank you so much for presenting for us today.
Thank you, Grady. Well, in the essence of time, let's go ahead and get right into it. So here is a quick snapshot of what we're going to cover during our time together today. So we're going to cover the ABLE Act and how it came to be, eligibility requirements, how ABLE works with benefit programs like supplemental security income and Medicaid. We're also going to take you on a little bit of a journey through the ABLE landscape and what it looks like nationally, as well as here in the state of Florida. And then we're going to get into the specifics on Able United. So the ins and the outs of how ABLE accounts work. And then, of course, we are going to end with special needs trust. You all are familiar with this, but we're going to cover a brief overview in this particular section. I want to just quickly point out about questions. So if you have questions at any point in time, please do be sure to put that in the questions box on the GoToWebinar control panel. John and I will be reviewing those in real time, and we'll also leave plenty of time after the presentation to answer a few here today. But I know, John, you had a quick poll that we wanted to run to see just.
I'm going to run, if it's okay with you, I want to run two polls. Just
sure.
First of all, to make sure everybody's question box is working, can you just put in the questions box where you're from, what city? Hopefully we're all from the state of Florida, but if you're not, welcome. But just let me know where you're coming from. Orlando, Melbourne, Daytona Beach is in the house. I'm seeing some familiar names as well in Clearwater, Boca Raton, Sarasota. I know some people out there not representing. Okay, there you go, Miami. So good, any Panhandle folks.
Great. Yeah, and I don't see anyone from the Panhandle here yet.
So good stuff. So a good range of people, and just to kind of get a pulse of how we're going to go about this presentation is just how familiar are you with ABLE accounts? Maybe you all are experts and you should be the director of the ABLE program, or maybe you're just learning about the program and you want to see how these work with special needs trust, or maybe you're in between. Maybe you've attended a webinar, viewed the website before, and just kind of get a pulse here of the audience. Give everybody a few seconds to fill that out.
See those votes trickling in?
Yeah. Give everybody about 5 more seconds to click on their option, and then we'll share that here. Okay. So let's share. Let's just kind of get where we're all at here. So somewhat familiar to familiar. So that's a good spread. So that's perfect. So hopefully the goal of this will give you all the ins and outs and to really set you on the right path when it comes to ABLE accounts. So, but with that, I'm going to go ahead, turn this back over to Rachel to kind of give us a history lesson.
Yeah, let's do it. So I always love starting this presentation with a little backstory. So pictured here is our good friend and advocate, Jen Sikora, with her son, Sean, who has Down syndrome. So Jen is a founding member of the ABLE Act and also one of our ABLE United ambassadors. So if you aren't familiar with the story of ABLE, I'm going to give you a little bit of a snapshot here. So more than a decade ago, a group of parents gathered around a kitchen table to have that conversation about saving for their disabled children's future, right? So how could they save for their child with a disability just like they can for their children without a disability? As you all know, for far too long, individuals receiving benefits were forced to kind of adopt that spend versus save mentality. So in an effort to provide increased opportunity for this community, of course, the ABLE Act was born. So what is ABLE? So ABLE, of course, stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and it is a federal law that was enacted in December of 2014. And basically what it did was it authorized each state to establish a program that offers tax-free savings and investment accounts to really encourage individuals with disability and their families to save private funds to support health, independence, and quality of life. So when the ABLE Act was passed, it added a new section to the Internal Revenue Code, Section 529, which you might be familiar with, to 529A, which of course A stands for ABLE. So therefore, an account is often compared to a 529 college savings plan, as well as a checking and savings account and a special needs trust. So it has all of those kind of similarities to each of these options that I just mentioned and that are also on the screen here, kind of all rolled into one. So I do want to spend a little bit of time kind of covering the Florida ABLE Act. So in July of 2015, the state of Florida created Florida ABLE Inc. And so we are a registered not-for-profit and direct support organization of the Florida Prepaid College Board. So again, they do administer the ABLE United program. And our mission, ABLE United's mission, of course, is to encourage and assist the saving of private funds to help individuals with disabilities cover costs that support, again, their health, independence, and quality of life. So some of you might be familiar with Florida Prepaid. Maybe your children have a Florida Prepaid program or plan. Florida Prepaid is an organization that has helped more than 1 million families save over the last 30 years, and they manage over $12 billion in investment. So we are proud to be housed directly under that organization. You'll also note here that our board of directors are comprised of the following. So we have the Florida Prepaid chairman, a vice chair that Florida Prepaid appoints, as well as appointees from the governor, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House. Most notably, our board includes Congressman Andrew Crenshaw from Jacksonville, Florida, who played a critical role in the passage of the ABLE Act. So
and if I could, Rachel, I would add just a snippet of that. And so I think it's important to know that our board is a nonprofit board. None of the individuals on there receive any kind of pay from the program, right. But the program itself is actually ran by the state of Florida. And so I'm a state employee, and we have contracts, and we vendor out a lot of the record keeping, the legal counsel, et cetera, to establish the program. And so it's just important to know of how this kind of works. And we're actually, Florida Prepaid and ABLE all fall under the umbrella of the State Board of Administration. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that this is a state-run program.
Awesome. So we're going to first cover eligibility, and we want to kind of talk about, again, who can open up an account. I want to point out here, again, another one of our really wonderful account holders. So pictured here is Alicia, who opened up an ABLE United account to save specifically for a wheelchair accessible van. So when it comes to eligibility, let's cover kind of the basics here. So eligible individuals are allowed only one ABLE account nationwide, and they have to meet these 3 requirements. So first, the individual with disability must be a Florida resident at the time of enrollment. Second, the individual's disability had to have an onset prior to age 26. And third, the individual must be receiving supplemental security income or Social Security disability insurance and have a disability that is marked as severe. Of course, those not receiving SSI or SSDI have the option to then self-certify, but they have to meet these additional requirements. So they have to have a diagnosis of a physical or mental impairment prior to the age of 26. They have to have a disability that is marked and severe with functional limitations. And lastly, they have to have a disability expected to last at least 12 months. But you might be asking yourself, what does that term severe mean? So ultimately, a qualifying disability includes individuals with a diagnosis such as Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, as well as other cognitive, developmental, or mental health disorders. And of course, that also is going to include our visual and hearing impaired community. But if an individual is unsure if they qualify for an ABLE account, we always recommend that they come directly to our website at ableunited.com and check out our eligibility wizard. Answer a few simple questions, and then you'll get served right there if you are eligible for an ABLE account. So let's move on to ownership. So when it comes to ownership, it's really important to note that unlike some other savings and investment accounts, the individual with the disability is the owner of the ABLE account. So they are going to be called what we call the beneficiary. So, but it's important to note that another person can help in opening and or maintaining the account. So that's going to include individuals like a parent, legal guardian, or power of attorney. But we do want to call out specifically here for a beneficiary who is over the age of 18. An authorized legal representative or an ALR can also help to set up or maintain the account. So of course that ALR is someone who is legally authorized by the state and under federal law as well to make decisions on behalf of the beneficiary. So if that is the case, additional paperwork will be required during the enrollment process.
And stay tuned to this. This will come back up as we further go along in the presentation, and we kind of give an update of the landscape on ABLE. And we'll tackle a little bit about who can open these accounts for individuals with disabilities.
That's right.
And so from here on out, I'm going to cover a little bit on public benefits, right? Because one of the key advantages of ABLE accounts is to be able to maintain eligibility for federally means tested programs. And so we'll kind of dive into what that means. First is Medicaid. Medicaid is a federal and state program that helps pay for medical costs, a very robust system that helps pay for medical costs that you cannot get under regular health insurance. So there's two parts to that. There's usually the ones that we most interact with are people receiving that Medicaid health plan kind of insurance, and the other being the Medicaid I-budget waiver, which is a home and community-based waiver offered and served through the agency for persons with disabilities, and really helps individuals with significant disabilities to be able to maintain their ability to stay in community-based supports and services and at home. And so funds in an ABLE account and even withdrawn from an ABLE account are generally disregarded when determining Medicaid eligibility. So that's pretty key, because eligibility or Medicaid has a limit on how much an individual can have in assets, which is $2,000. So being able to save above that into an ABLE account is key. Now, when the federal law passed, it did kind of put some vague language on there that stated if an individual was receiving Medicaid services and had an ABLE account, if they passed, the state may file a claim for Medicaid services received during the time they had an ABLE account. However, here in the state of Florida, we kind of clarified that law to basically say that any outstanding funds in the ABLE account, after all outstanding qualified disability expenses are paid, would go to that beneficiary's estate, and then that estate may be subject to Medicaid repayment or clawback. So that's an important differentiation to know on what happens to these funds. And it really does change the conversation to not being able to have any money to potentially having to set up an estate in what's going to happen to that individual's funds if they were to pass away. The other big federally means tested program is supplemental security income. That's that federal supplement that helps pay for basic living expenses like food, housing, and shelter, clothing. And so that monthly check, I think it's up to $776, or somebody can correct me because we're in a new year, so I think it's like $790 now. But anyways, those funds, since it is a federally means tested program, there's some rules on how people, how much money they can have, which is that $2,000 limit. The great thing is generally funds in an ABLE account are disregarded when determining that eligibility for SSI, but there are some additional rules. First is the first $100,000 in the ABLE account does not count as a resource. So if an individual gets above that, anything above that would count towards that $2,000 limit. And we'll have an example of what would happen if, in that situation. And then also, if individuals are using this for housing related expenses or non-qualified expenses past the month of the withdrawal, it could count as a resource and could technically penalize them and have their benefits suspended or lost. So just some additional rules to be wary of, but we're going to give some examples of how individuals can go about keeping their SSI, keeping their full SSI check, and utilizing an ABLE account to its fullest. We always recommend individuals that you might serve that are receiving SSI and are interested in opening an ABLE account to check out the ABLE POMS manual. That's the Program Operations Manual System that Social Security Administration has made public that kind of gives the in and outs of how they are to treat ABLE accounts. So let's get some of those examples. The first one here is a housing example, and this is really key for individuals trying to, let's say, for example, have their special needs trust contribute to their ABLE account then pay for housing in order for them to keep their full SSI check. So how does that work? So here's an example. You have Amy. She takes $500 out of her ABLE account in May to pay for a housing expense in June. If she deposits that $500 into her checking account in May and then retains it past the end of the month, so she's keeping it into June, she takes it out in June and pays her landlord, for example, that would be a housing related expense. And for the part of for SSI, they would treat that as part of her checking account and towards that $2,000 resource limit on June 1. So it could be a countable resource. It could cause her to have her SSI benefits suspended or even reduced. And so how do you avoid this in-kind support and maintenance reduction is either have the ABLE account pay it directly or withdraw and pay it in the same month. And that's for when we say housing related expenses, that's the same definition that Social Security has. So it's pretty broad, it includes utility bills, insurance for the home, etc. So that's important to know. But just thinking back at some of the distributions I've seen from an ABLE account, I have seen several housing related expenses, whether that be for utilities. I've seen some homeowner insurance payments as well. So it's pretty cool that people are now being able to save for those kinds of expenses and not have their benefits jeopardized. The other example I want to provide is that $100,000 limit. Now, it's important to know when we mention this $100,000 limit, it really is only applicable to individuals on supplemental security income. If they're on SSDI, that's an earned benefit. They're not looking at assets. If it's Medicaid, once again, they're not looking at ABLE accounts. But SSI, Social Security Administration, is looking at these, and it's part of a state agency and part of having it running the ABLE program. Part of that requirement for federal law is for us to submit transactions monthly to the Social Security Administration and for them to follow up and review any transactions for SSI accounts to find out how those were utilized. So we'll talk about in our withdrawal section, but just want to give you just some oversight of how Social Security Administration is looking at ABLE accounts. So here's an example. We have Paul has an ABLE account with a balance of $101,000, right? So he's over that $100,000 threshold. So anything above that would be counted as a resource. Paul's only other countable resource is a checking account with a balance of $1,500. So if you put his countable resource of his checking account plus the additional $1,000 in his ABLE account, that would be a total of $2,500 or over that $2,000 limit. And therefore, his SSI benefits would be suspended. They wouldn't be stopped, but they would be suspended, his cash benefits, but he would still retain eligibility for Medicaid. So that's important to know. And so I usually recommend people on SSI to, when you get to 100,000, definitely monitor it, because that could jeopardize your benefits. And so considerations, once again, these accounts are limited to 15,000 per annual in contributions, and then to monitor it for individuals on SSI that are getting close to that $100,000 level. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the federal law basically says that pretty broad federally means tested programs, right? And so that's a pretty broad statement. And so just a little bit of background, for Section 103A of the Tax Increase Prevention Act of 2014, it kind of gave some further definition of what does it mean, what kind of guidance could you provide about other means tested programs. And basically it says, notwithstanding any provision of federal law, so that's some good legal language for you all, but basically any assistance or benefits authorized by such provision, where they're kind of looking at some of these resources that an ABLE account, contributions to the ABLE account, distributions for qualified disability expenses shall be disregarded for such purposes with respect to any period during which such individual makes contributions to or receives distributions from such an ABLE account. So that's pretty broad, and some various ABLE national groups will say, okay, well, let's get something in writing, right? It's great that there's this guidance, but let's get these various federal agencies to kind of sign off on this. And we've seen a bulk of them have. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services has released a letter, and all of these resources that I mentioned. So for example, these letters, they're available on our website under our resource tab. There is a professional resources tab. There you'll be able to actually get your hands on this letter if you want it for your records. But basically say, hey, ABLE account, earnings into the account, disregarded for income, the earnings portion, disregarded when taking the money out. And so it did leave the Medicaid recovery up to the states on how they want to go about doing it. So the federal law is not saying you have to file a claim, but then ultimately here in the state, we're saying, it's going back to that estate anyways, and then let them go through estate recovery clauses if necessary. What about other federally means tested programs? So we have the Food and Nutrition Service, or SNAP, as many of us probably refer to it as. Basically, they put out a letter saying, hey, if you're trying to qualify for SNAP, ABLE accounts should not count as an income or a resource. HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, have put out a statement saying that ABLE accounts do not count as resources. And the last, what's interesting is the one type of mean tested program when it comes to this type of program is FAFSA. So individuals that are applying for college education to get, any additional financial aid, we, on a federal level, I know they're pushing the Department of Education to say, hey, can you release a statement, because they're one of the last federally mean tested programs to not have released a letter on how they're going to treat ABLE accounts. But for all intents and purposes, it should be excluded when determining that. All right. Whew, that was a mouthful. So hopefully you all are still there and awake, and we're gonna get to some fun, exciting updates on what's been going on lately. So this lovely lady who's also behind me, I think it's the reverse image of her. I don't know. And so that's Latasha and her daughter Cairo. It was awesome doing this photo shoot. I met Cairo for 10 seconds and she was hugging, and when you could actually interact with people without having to be 6 feet apart. That was a few years back, but just was a joy, and she kept trying to take her mom's lipstick. It was awesome. So I just love anytime we get to meet with the end user and be like, how are they going to use the ABLE account? And so she didn't know, but she's like, just save it, just put the money away. We'll see what the future holds. So let's kind of give an update of where we are across the country, right? Because the federal law really allowed this for states to enact their own legislation and then to pass it. And so how is it set up across the country, right? So we're Florida's program. To date, 43 other states, including Washington, D.C., has launched ABLE programs, which is pretty interesting. But how they have launched and knowing the scale of ABLE programs, it's kind of interesting of how they've come about. So of all these programs that are launched, 18 of them belong to what they call the ABLE Alliance. Basically, it's a national consortium where they all use the same kind of back-end records keeper and investment options, but it's kind of branded for their in-state citizens. And so 18 various states have taken advantage of that. The other big player is Ohio. They have launched called Stable, is the name of their program, and they have partnered with 11 other states across the country. It's pretty interesting. They're in the process now of transitioning their back end to a new company, to an organization that you all might be familiar with called TrueLink Financial. They'll come up again when we talk about a prepaid card that Able United offers. But they are in the process of moving over their records keeper to TrueLink Financial, which is pretty interesting. Oregon has partnered with 2 other states, Washington and Maryland, to launch a program. And we use the same back-end system as Oregon does called Someday. And we'll talk about them when we talk about enrollment. Nebraska and Alabama are partners as well, and then 9 other states are independent, basically meaning that they have set up and ran their own program. And it makes sense, a lot of the larger states that have the resources to do so have done that. So Florida's one, Texas, California, New York, and several others have launched their own ABLE program. And so many of these programs kind of launched in between 2017, which is when we took off, through the end of that year, all the way up to probably about 2019. A bulk of them have launched. And every once in a while, you'll have a new one come on. I think Connecticut actually launched in January. And so they're on. And then there's, I believe, 2 or 3 states right now that are in the process of enacting state legislation to allow them to open up. I think Wisconsin and Montana. So where we stand, right? This program launched, a bulk of them launched in the last 4 or 5 years. We're coming up on our 5th anniversary. How does it look from a landscape? So at the end of December of this past year, 82,000 accounts have been are open and in good order, meaning that they're still open, that there's money in them across the country. Of those, 5,200 are here run by the state of Florida's ABLE program. What I didn't mention before is as these states have launched, and actually it'll be on the next slide as well, but some states do have national enrollment, so they might have Florida residents in there as well. So I don't exactly know those numbers. But if you look at all these programs across and you add up all of how much money they're managing on behalf of these beneficiaries, it comes up to $643 million under management. And here in the state of Florida, we just surpassed 40 million this week in assets under management. But it's just pretty cool. I think some of the background and when this program was first launched and other programs across the country were launched, individuals didn't know if we were going to have a ton of accounts and no money, or smaller amount of accounts, but a lot more money. I think that's been the case, which makes sense because you do have to have funds to be able to put into the account. So what are you going to see, right? So what are the differences going to be between Florida's ABLE program, Georgia's ABLE program, et cetera? And so really the similarities you're going to see is we all have to follow the same state or federal law, right? We're all under that same kind of federal law and regulations. We'll talk about the final regulations that came out here soon. Each state had to enact their own legislation, who was going to run it across the country. A majority of these programs are actually run by the same organization or state entity that runs the 529 plan. A lot of other states have what they call treasury offices. And so you see a lot of state treasurer offices running these programs. And then online enrollment, that's been universal. Knowing that the scale of this is going to be pretty small, so a majority of programs are actually all of them do offer online enrollment, and several do offer paper applications for offline enrollment as well. So what are the differences going to be, right? And the biggest is going to be fees, right? And we'll talk specifically on Able United's fees, but nationally fees range anywhere between our program, which doesn't charge a monthly fee, to states that charge up to $60 a year in fees. Also, how is this program opened and who can enroll is different from states. Some states, Florida specifically, since we are funded by state taxpayer dollars, are only open to state residents at the time of application. But other states have national programs that anybody can enroll. Also, the investment line is going to change. Here we'll talk about specifically for Able United's investment options, but most states are kind of similar to Able United. There's one program that offers 20 plus different investment options. And some states require checking or savings accounts to establish an account. So, or require when they start the program, they're going to put the money in what they call a demand account or direct demand account, which is kind of like a checking account. And they have to reach a certain threshold before they can invest. So it's pretty interesting on those type of particulars between programs. And then finally, as I mentioned, the back end records administration. So who's actually managing the program, the accounts in the program, and really, there's probably 3 or 4 big players in the scheme of Able, and then several states have kind of set their own one-offs. Switching gears a little bit to talk about federal legislation, right? So this was passed in 2014, the original legislation, but since then several additional changes have happened. One being, right off the bat, that's not on here, was one to allow states to offer enrollment to individuals outside of their state. So that passed actually in 2015. But in 2017, we had the first significant change to the ABLE program was the passage of the Able to Work Act. And what this did was individuals not saving for retirement could utilize an ABLE account to do that and take advantage of the Savers Credit. So that was a kind of an addition. Also, they could contribute above the annual contribution limit, either up to their earned income or the federal poverty limit for a single household income of that state. So, here in the state of Florida, I think it's up to $12,940 in addition to the $15,000 that individuals can save, as long as they're not saving for retirement. The next piece that kind of was tied to that was the ABLE Financial Planning Act. This allowed individuals to now roll over 529 plans to their ABLE accounts without taking any kind of penalization. There is a kind of a little caveat to that. It is limited to 15,000 per. It counts towards that annual contribution limit of 15,000. And so what's unique, as we mentioned, we're under Florida prepaid. Well, some of the Florida prepaid plans cost 25, 30,000. And so we've had to work with families of trying to say, okay, let's, convert them over 15,000 at a time. And it does take a couple years to do that. But I worked with one family that actually had, significant, approaching $400,000 in their 529 college savings plan and wanting to roll over to an ABLE account. And so it's just going to take a lot of time for them to do that. And I said, talk to some attorneys. They might have some creative ways of how they can go about moving the money away. You guys are good like that. And then finally, Age Adjustment Act. So this is now been the 4th year in a row this has been introduced. Out of all the years, what I'm hearing from federal, from a lot of the federal state organizations and some of the federal lobbyists is that this has real legs this year. They think as long as there's a bill that's moving across, they think this would be easy to add to it. It's in a very positive atmosphere. But basically, this would up the age of the onset of the disability from 26 to 46. So it does broaden who would be eligible for an ABLE account. Some of the earliest projections is nationwide, this would allow an additional 6 to 8 million individuals become eligible nationwide. And so that's here in Florida, a few 100,000 of individuals that could now, hopefully, if this gets passed in this year, could allow for some additional enrollment. So I know you all, oh, look, final regulations. Here's the last thing. And then I was all excited to turn this back over to Rachel. But final regulations, right? So the Treasury had to put out, actually finalize their regulations at the end of November to kind of give final guidance to the states on how these programs are to be run. Overall, there wasn't too many changes, but one of the biggest things that they added in the final regs was the expansion on who can be an authorized signatory for an individual's ABLE account. So as we mentioned before, currently it's limited to somebody that had a power of attorney, guardianship paperwork, or was the parent of And this kind of expanded that. We're still vetting this through our legal to make sure we're all on the same page. But you see in this hierarchy includes everything from a sibling, a spouse, grandparent, and even a Social Security administrative representative payee, which was new. And so hopefully we'll be rolling out something similar to that would allow organizational rep payees to open these accounts. Also, sub-accounts permitted, program-wise, I don't know that that's a lot of these record keepers have the capability of doing it, but it would allow to create basically an account inside of an ABLE account. So you could separate, if I had investments and I want an investment advisor to manage it, they could do that. No additional guidance on QDEs, so qualified disability expenses, and we'll do a deep dive on that. And that was one of the big press points that I know a lot of the questions we get is, is this a qualified disability expense? Would this be a qualified disability expense? And so, unfortunately, the Treasury did not provide any additional guidance on that, but they did put the little terminology or add a little caveat on it's broad but not unlimited, right? So you can't just go willy-nilly and use all the money and go gambling and hopefully you win the lottery. But instead, that there is some limits to it. And then they did provide some additional guidance on somebody who was passing away, or if they had a successor designated beneficiary, basically a sibling that was qualified for an ABLE account, how you could roll that over to them. So, so that's the final reg. So this is quite significant changes, some huge changes hopefully coming, and it will really benefit overall the individuals that we all serve. So. But with that, I know you all love hearing me, but I'm going to turn this back over to Rachel to kind of do a deep dive into the specifics of Florida's program, ABLE United.
So I see a couple of questions and comments in the questions box about the excitement over some of those federal legislation pieces that are currently in the works, primarily, of course, the ABLE Age Adjustment Act. So we are too very excited. Everyone keep their fingers and toes crossed. That would be so amazing for the disability community. But John, I want to send you a quick question here. So someone's asking, does that also include Social Security Administration rep payees? Could they now be authorized account administrators on an ABLE account?
Yeah, and that's a good question. That's what we're currently working through legal. I was actually on a national call with other ABLE programs yesterday, and there are several states that had some pushback based on some of their state laws that really required whoever the fiduciary of an individual to have some kind of power of attorney in place or guardianship of property in place. That hasn't been our mindset so far, so I'm confirming with legal that we're going down this route. But ideally, I would love to be able to open this up to start out with organizational rep payees, and then all the way down to individual rep payees as an authorized signatory, because the big thing is ultimately an individual who is assisting this individual with Social Security funds will probably be utilizing it to put leftover Social Security funds into the ABLE account. So there's a natural bridge there. And so stay tuned is the most I can say now, but hopefully that will be a realization sooner rather than later.
Awesome. Okay, so let's dive into the specifics on ABLE United. So now an account is opened. How does it work? But again, before we dive in, I just want to introduce, this is Joseph with his sister and caregiver, Rhonda. They are from the Orlando area. And again, we had the opportunity to meet them at this video and photo shoot. We really love telling the stories of our account holders, and we love meeting them, most importantly. So we always encourage you all, if you have a success story, or if you're working with someone who is opening up a new account and they're saving for something specific. I think about some of our account holders who we know, John, who opened up an ABLE account with that one thing in mind. I think of our friend Sean, who was able to buy his first car thanks to his ABLE account. So if you guys have stories to tell, please, please, please let us know. We're always interested in wanting to meet some of the folks who have ABLE accounts and, of course, are really benefiting from them. So let's go ahead and transition into the next slide. So I know John kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier on, but Someday Administration. So we of course want to introduce you to them. They are our plan manager. They also provide the online platform for Able United. So of course, Someday Administration is owned by the Bank of New York Mellon. They are one of the world's largest financial institutions, and their core mission is to improve lives through investing. So we collaborated with them to give our account holders really a secure online experience and a way for them to open and manage their accounts. And of course, the online platform is very intuitive, which makes it really easy to add, excuse me, or withdraw money from the account, as well as manage the Able United account in full. So let's cover the enrollment process here. So enrolling and managing an Able United account is all done online at ableunited.com. We always get the question of, are you in person? Do I need to go to a bank? And the answer is no. So everything is all done online. But of course, if individuals do need support during the enrollment process, we are happy to provide that. We have an excellent team of customer service representatives who are available Monday through Friday. And we actually just launched Able Office Hours, where individuals can talk to either John or myself or some other of our team members about questions that they have specifically on either the program or the enrollment process itself. So really the enrollment process is quick, it's easy, and it's free. So it truly takes less than 30 minutes. And like I mentioned, the back end piece is really intuitive. But we want to just quickly cover here what is needed to open an Able account. So first and foremost, it's going to be the date of birth, address, and social security number for the individuals on the account. So that's going to include the beneficiary, so the individual with the disability, and or the account administrator. The next piece is going to be the documentation of power of attorney or legal guardianship for an adult beneficiary over the age of 18. The banking information, so you're going to connect a bank account that's going to help you contribute and withdraw funds, a minimum $25 account contribution, and then of course investment selections. We also want to note here too that in the enrollment process, individuals will also categorize the primary disability type. So there's going to be 7 categories to choose from. And then of course they have the opportunity to self-certify based on eligibility. So again, a recipient of SSI, SSDI, or a diagnosis that is marked in severe with functional limitations, as we discussed a little bit earlier. So moving on to the investment options. So we currently offer 8 investment options, which range from the portfolio options you see on the left side of the screen, and then our fund options on the right. And you'll see for the portfolio options, we have 3 predetermined options for individuals to choose from: conservative, moderate, and growth. And then we also have 5 fund options, which you'll see here. So we have a money market fund, a US bond fund, US stock fund, international stock fund, and our newest offering, which launched last year, the FDIC savings option. So I'm sure most of you are familiar, but of course the FDIC savings option is going to be an alternative to investing. So assets up to $250,000 are protected and insured, but keep in mind that with a low level of risk, there's also going to be that lower level of return. And then of course, one other point to keep in mind here is that when it comes to investments, an individual who has an Able United account can change how incoming contributions are invested at any time, and really as frequent as they want. However, funds already invested in the program, so funds that are already in the Able United account and invested, can only be rebalanced or reinvested twice a year. So all of our performance information is available online at ableunited.com if an individual is interested in learning a little bit more about that. So moving on to the next slide, we really just like to showcase this and really showing that there is a lot to be said, right, for putting your spare change to work for you. And the truth is, individuals have to start somewhere. So here's a quick snapshot of values on regular monthly contributions with an assumed 5% rate of return, and of course, no fees applied. So moving on to the contribution piece, one of my favorite things about an Able United account is that after it is opened, you can contribute what you can when you can. So you can save just with yourself, you can save with the help of friends and family, or maybe even an organization like a church or a civic group, all the way up to $15,000 from all sources per calendar year. And of course, as John mentioned, there is one exception, and that is if the individual is working. So thanks to the Able to Work legislation, beneficiaries who are working and not currently saving for retirement can contribute above that $15,000 account contribution limit. And then of course, again, John mentioned this too, individuals also have the opportunity to contribute to an Able United account through the rollover funds from 529 college savings plans. And then the last piece here that I want to cover is that there is no federal income tax deduction for contributing to an Able United account. So that means that nobody can write contributions to an Able United account off as a donation. So contributions are considered completed gifts and not income to the individual. However, if the individual is putting in their own earned income, or if it is some kind of unearned income like child support. And then of course, as I mentioned, it is so easy to save with the help of friends and family, especially due to our enhanced gifting page. So kind of think of it as like a GoFundMe page. So individuals can set a goal and then they can share via email and social media really easily with individuals and or organizations as a way for them to maybe give gifts instead of physical presents for a birthday or holiday. So moving on to the withdrawal piece, now that we put money in, how do we take it out? So again, one of my other favorite things about an Able United account is just how flexible it is. So money can be withdrawn from an account at any time for any reason. And of course, withdrawals can be made electronically, by check, or with our Able prepaid card. So as John mentioned a little bit earlier, that is a newer enhancement that we launched last year that is provided by TrueLink. But really what that the introduction of the prepaid card allowed is for individuals to instantly access funds from their Able United account to be used online, in stores, or really anywhere nationwide that it's going to accept Visa debit cards. So we like to think of it as kind of an Able United account on the go. But a few considerations here when it comes to withdrawing from an Able United account. So the first is if money in an Able United account is spent on qualified disability expenses as defined by federal law, the earnings on the money withdrawn are considered tax-free. We're going to cover a little bit on the next slide, a little bit more about those qualified disability expenses. But the next piece, you have the opportunity to choose which investment to draw from, which really is going to allow individuals the opportunity to separate their savings from their investing. So again, another key benefit here. And then lastly, keep documentation for the IRS and or the Social Security Administration. So if asked by either one of those organizations, the beneficiary or the account administrator on the account is going to be responsible for providing the receipts for qualified disability expenses. So we always recommend that individuals or the person who is helping to manage the account keep the necessary documentations on hand. So if asked, they can show that the expense does relate to the individual with a disability and ultimately helps to, of course, improve their health, independence, or quality of life. So again, let's kind of talk about the qualified disability expenses. We know we've mentioned them a couple of times during this presentation. So if money in an Able United account is spent on one of the qualified disability expenses that you see here on the screen, of course, they are going to be, the earnings on the money withdrawn will be considered tax-free. So some of these expenses are going to include health, education, housing, transportation, legal fees and services, financial management, employment training and support, assistive technology and personal support services, oversight and monitoring, funeral and burial, the list goes on. So of course, all of those expenses listed here are approved by the Treasury regulations. But ultimately, qualified disability expenses include basic living expenses, but they are not limited to items for which there is a medical necessity or which solely benefit the beneficiary. So ultimately, it was written to be construed very broadly. As long as the expense relates back to the individual with the disability or the beneficiary and helps to improve their overall health, independence, or quality of life, it's going to be considered a qualified disability expense. However, one caveat here, right, is if an expense is not a qualified disability expense, the funds spent are subject to tax plus a 10% penalty on the earnings. And so John and I always say it's the big four. So as long as the funds in an Able United account are not being spent on alcohol, tobacco, gambling, or giving the money away, it's going to be considered a qualified disability expense. So taxes, another big question we often get from individuals. So as far as taxes go, each Able United account is going to be treated separately, and each will receive separate tax documents. So we always recommend that individuals consult with their tax advisor for information about whether they need to file taxes for an Able United account. But you'll see here that two different types of tax forms individuals might receive if they have an Able United account. So Form 5498QA, which is going to show the contributions in the establishment of the Able account. And then, of course, if a withdrawal is made, then they will receive a 1099QA showing the earnings and basis of the distributions.
And I wanted to add here, Rachel, so it's important to know when it comes to utilizing the ABLE account, really from an IRS perspective, they're only looking at the calendar year, not each month. So like Social Security is looking for. So at the end of the year, that 1099 QA will show all withdrawals combined for the year. And really they want to know, did you have that amount in qualified disability expenses? And so usually I tell individuals, that should not be worrisome because based on the Treasury regs, basic living expenses is a qualified expense. So if you went grocery shopping, you filled up your car with gas, you bought clothes for the year, or you took a trip because, you know, that's, who doesn't take a vacation for, you know, a better quality of life or some more independence. So really, you know, this shouldn't be a case where an individual would have to file for taxes for any reason. And it was funny, we actually had a CPA come on who said, you know, even if that was the case, and let's say the individual, you know, if they weren't employed, well, there's no income state tax on the earnings portion, and then, you know, the 10% penalty of whether the earnings would be so small, it's not even worthwhile. So just, you know, I just like to, it's more of a knowing that these exist and that they could be received, and but best to hold on to it and keep those receipts just in case.
Always. Okay, well, last but not least, cost associated. So we get asked, what's the catch here? What's going on? This seems too good to be true, but really the answer is that you know, opening up an Able United account is free. And so we offer no application fee, no monthly account maintenance fee. We are really proud to say that we don't have any fees associated with opening our accounts here in Florida. There is going to be that $25 minimum contribution that has to be made in order to formally open the Able account. And then, of course, there's going to be some optional fees associated. So you'll, of course, have that optional fee for $10 for paper statements. And then there is going to be a $2.50 per month fee associated with opening the Able prepaid card. And then, of course, you know, investment administration fees will vary, but truly the way that we look at it is that you would spend less than $3 per $1,000 in the account annually. So if an individual did actually max out their account to the full $15,000, you're still paying less than $45 per year. And then, of course, the FDIC investment option has no fees associated.
And that's a good point. That's something we did not mention, was the kind of the upper cap, right? So we said the $100,000 limit really is for SSI recipients. Individuals not worried about a cap. These accounts can get up to $415,000, but even with amazing returns and maxing out contributions per year, it would take 20 plus years to get to that. So and you know, get to me at that time, and hopefully we can up the limit. So so stay tuned. But I guess it's my turn now to talk to attorneys about things they should know about, right? Special needs trust and ABLE, right? So hopefully you all are familiar with special needs trust, and really the goal of this part is just to kind of say how do they work together. And then this slide's really just high-level background on what special needs trusts are. There's first the first-party special needs trust. Whose money is it? It's the individual. You know, if it's my money, it's first party. If it's Rachel's money, it's third party. You know, so the common ones you're going to see is the D4A. Those are your typical special needs trusts. They're set for somebody under the age of 65. It can be used to fund their own money. Maybe it's an unplanned inheritance. Maybe it's a personal injury award. And really, thinking back of what the purpose of a special needs trust, it's for an individual to maintain eligibility for Medicaid services. That's ultimately what it's for. And so usually, hopefully, individuals will have some kind of estate of planning. So for an unplanned inheritance, that wouldn't be an issue, but that does still happen. Also, the D4B, the qualified income trust, that's more of an individual who's seeking to earn above the public limit threshold while maintaining Medicaid benefits, but there's a lot of rules surrounding that. And then finally, the pooled special needs trust, which really combines individuals who have similar type of situations into a kind of pooling their resources together to reduce administrative costs. And then first party special needs trusts do have a mandatory payback upon death to help recoup some of those costs for Medicaid services rendered during their lifetime. Really, where ABLE accounts shine and work well with are third-party special needs trusts. So, you know, mom and dad, somebody else has set up an account. So if they pass away, or you know, grandma wants to leave $10,000 or $100,000 to somebody, or you know, there's a significant wealth transfer happening to an individual with a significant disability, that's where third-party special needs trusts are great, because they can be utilized to let them maintain their eligibility, but to give them that additional funds to help pay for items they need. So the great thing is that third-party special needs trusts can be used to fund ABLE accounts. We actually see quite a few accounts being funded by special needs trusts, which is pretty cool. And those, you know, because ABLE accounts provide that flexibility. Third-party special needs trusts really part of the estate planning. They can, you know, when they're set up, they can be set up to accept non-cash assets, insurance policies, homes, etc. Requires one of you all to set it up. It does have to be approved if you're going through Social Security Administration. There's a trustee to be overseen. And once again, I'm not an attorney, so this has just been told to me. But I did read a brochure, so I guess that counts. You know, we usually tell people, you know, early on we got a lot of questions on, hey, I've had a third-party special needs trust. Can I go ahead and fund an ABLE account? I mean, it goes back to that document. You know, I know there's several of you on now that have provided language or have language available to kind of a provision that would play friendly to allow those kind of distributions to happen. But an ABLE account, you know, gives that additional flexibility, a great way to pay for those housing-related expenses and now have a in-kind support maintenance reduction or ISM reduction from Social Security. That's kind of cool. These can grow tax-free, free online enrollment. You know, give somebody either that individual or the administrator the flexibility to kind of run their own funds. Talking about that prepaid card we mentioned, we see just an increased use of those, which is pretty cool. A few months back, there was a national webinar from TrueLink Financial, who probably provides the most ABLE cards across, you know, combined compared to all other programs, and they kind of did a breakdown of how funds are being used, and it's pretty cool. You know, online shopping was a huge one because they take Visa debit cards, and then another surprising one I thought was pretty cool was transportation. You're seeing people use some rideshare services to get to and from places, you know, especially in places where the local transportation isn't on par, but you can use rideshare services to get where they needed to go. So that's pretty cool. That was a rabbit trail, sorry. So going back to special needs trust, you know, the difference, we're online, we're limited to how much you can save. Important thing to know, there's protection against creditors for an ABLE account. So creditors can't come after the assets in an ABLE account. And probably a fellow attorney that you might be familiar with, Travis Fincham, kind of created this chart. We color coded it to match our brand here, but want to credit him on this because it really kind of breaks down the differences you're going to see between the accounts, how they can work together, what are some of the limitations. So, you know, that third-party special needs trust, some of those issues, you know, there's taxes involved, so none of the special needs trusts can grow tax-free. They can't usually be utilized to pay for food and shelter without impacting benefits. You know, some of the pooled trust and you know, some of the typical third-party special needs might be a little bit lower in fees potentially. They definitely cannot be controlled by the beneficiary. ABLE's different, right? Because you're now giving individuals who might not have had any access to assets now could potentially have a significant asset. We, as we showed earlier, how much money was being invested across all of ABLE United. You know, our average account balance is creeping up to $7,000 per account. We had a handful of accounts cross the 100,000 threshold. So that's a real asset that a beneficiary may have access to, depending on how the accounts are set up. So there's some also additional benefits as well. And so I want to go ahead and open this up. We got you know, 10 minutes or so to kind of allow you all to put any kind of questions you have, or any kind of just open this up to the floor, and then I'll leave you with some of the final thoughts. But I know I see a couple of questions that come in, but if you haven't, and you have a burning desire question about ABLE accounts, go ahead and put it in there. Let's see now. We talked about the child support a little bit. I think Rachel did mention it, right, when we're talking about can an ABLE account receive child support payments, and the answer is yes. However, they still be count as income. So you know, unfortunately, you know, yes it can, but it still would count as an income towards that individual for other type of benefit programs.
Right.
Question on this presentation, Rachel, I think we are going to make this presentation available, correct?
Yes, we certainly will.
Yeah, if you've registered, we will have your contact information, and so we will be submitting it out to everybody in a follow-up email at a later date. So stay tuned for that. And also, when it comes to guardianship, the type of guardianship required to open an account for ABLE, really, you know, as long as it's not just like a durable power of attorney for somebody's health or guardianship over non-property stuff, we'd probably not look at that. But it could be a property, it could be just a broad guardianship. Those are all acceptable forms that we would accept to allow somebody to open an ABLE account on somebody else's behalf. So those are some pretty good questions. Just going through here. Rachel, did you see any other questions that
Yeah, we just got a new question that said, what proof will you require to show that an eligible family member is a person entitled to open the account for the beneficiary?
That is a great question. And so, because this goes back to the final regs that said, hey, you know, siblings, a spouse could open an ABLE account. We're still discussing it with legal, and it could be, you know, hopefully as easy as a self-certification under penalties of perjury that you are, and you attest that you are, you know, the next person in line to establish an ABLE account. There are some, from our records administration, there's some concerns with that. So it might be just a statement or a notarized statement of such that would qualify. So we're still looking through that. You know, for example, I know one pushing point was, what if you had a parent establish an ABLE account for a minor who is now becoming of age and could be 18 and access their ABLE account? Or are you going to force individuals to either submit some kind of documentation to state they still have authority to oversee that account. And we're not at this point. I know some other states are going down that road, but we do, let individuals know, hey, if they're 18 and they're competent, and we don't have any paperwork or statement otherwise stating that they're not competent, we would allow them to access their account. So that is an important decision making thing that needs to happen when somebody's looking to establish an account as that beneficiary starts to age, right? Just again, myself, if my child turned 18, when I want to, turn over a $50,000 bank account with their name on it that they knew about and could access. So it's a different kind of discussion. But unfortunately, there's some people that don't have that capacity, and so you have that safeguard. But it's a thing to know about.
Couple other questions here. Is it possible to name a successor administrator to manage the account, perhaps if the account administration or account administrator were to pass away?
Okay. That is a great question. So we actually expanded. We have a durable power of attorney available on our website specific for Able United accounts, and we actually broadened that to include, to make it a successor power of attorney, so that way if the administrator passed, that this other person could step up without having to supply additional paperwork. But typically, if individuals weren't in that situation, they can notify the program, or we could, there's a couple of ways. So if it's the death of account administrator, for example, we'd require that death certificate along with a signature saying who the new individual is going to be. But all that type of, we have forms for all these situations. The other one is, what if you're just changing who the administrator is, whether it be, for example, in the case of that we're working on with an organization that was kind of overseeing the account, now they're going to go back to the family, and we want to transition that over. There is a change of administrator form if the person's alive. Basically, it's a few signs and some notarizations, right, and then you can do that. So always a way to do that. But that's a good question. Another kind of question that's not on there, but I do see, is what happens if the if the beneficiary passes away? We get that. Can they leave it? Can they designate a successor beneficiary? So federal regs do allow an individual to leave it, name a successor designated beneficiary that is a sibling only, and that also qualifies for an ABLE account. And that's the cleanest way to do it. But those cases are few and far between. In most cases, what's going to end up happening is it's going to go after all outstanding qualified disability expenses are paid, including funeral and burial, that those funds would go to the estate of the beneficiary, and most likely go through probate, depending on just the amount in the account, and that's if there's anything left or not. So that's another question we get.
Have time for one more question, and this one is: an ABLE account considered an asset of a guardianship in Florida?
So good question. This has to deal, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, this is more of when it comes to guardianship, there's certain requirements for reporting back to the courts on, people's accounts. I usually recommend, always be proactive and letting individuals know that, hey, this account has been established for the beneficiary. There's you'll get quarterly statements that are going to help with that process. And more of a making it aware and being proactive, and it just really depends on what court you're with, because I've heard some courts that are like, hey, we don't care, we'll keep that separate, but others are like, no, I want to know everything in the ABLE account, all the transactions. So but we do make that information available online at any time, as well as those quarterly statements. So there's always ways to download or take snapshots or whatever it needs to do to be printed. Oh, here's a good question. I'll let you handle this one, Rachel. Can the beneficiary be a minor?
Can the beneficiary be a minor? Yes, of course they can. So the individual with a disability, again, just going back to the requirements to open up an ABLE account, they have to be a Florida resident. Their onset had to happen prior to age 26, and then they have to have a qualifying disability. But when it comes to ages, our youngest account holder is 6 months old. and our oldest, I believe, is in their late 80s.
Yeah, late 80s.
And then our average age is about 32. So that's a great question, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that is a good question. Can you name a beneficiary's trust as the beneficiary of the ABLE account? Name the beneficiary's trust. That's a good question. So a beneficiary has a trust and they want to name their ABLE account. The beneficiary. That's a good question. I would have to, seek other legal counsel to get back to you on that one. That's a good question. And going back to Rachel's question, though, I think that's just so cool is the longevity of these accounts, right? So this is a fairly new program. Each quarter, we're year over year, we're growing by 40 to 50%. And I don't know when that's might peak, but to think that some of these accounts could be 70, 80 years, past my prime for sure. Rachel will still be here though. That people can just use these past for a very long time. It's pretty cool. It's just going to be cool to see how people utilize them, right? Like I have a feeling in 5 to 10 years we're going to hear our first significant down payment on a house. I'm going to hear somebody going on an international trip maybe to go to a place they've always wanted to dream about visiting. For me, that's Australia, in case you all wanted to know. But just going to be really cool on how these accounts pan out over the years. So that's pretty exciting. But I want to just kind of wrap this up with final thoughts and just things to keep on top of mind and some of those more frequently asked kind of questions we get. And just highlight these. So generally, contributions and withdrawals are exempt as income. So this does not count as income to the individual. It's important to know. Account assets belong to the designated beneficiary. We spoke about this in length, so it is a different conversation, especially, if you're expecting a child to potentially have an ABLE account for 30, 40 years and you're dropping a couple grand in each year. That's a significant amount of money 10, 15 years down the road. So they can accumulate up to $418,000. When it gets to that, we will reject any additional contributions, but they continue to grow tax-free. Accounts can be used for housing if you're on SSI. There's just some additional rules. If done correctly, no ISM reduction. Post-death payments are allowed for outstanding qualified disability expenses. So if they had, utility bills that are outstanding, mortgage payment, or now funeral and burial costs, all those can still be paid out of the ABLE account before it's officially closed, and then most likely goes to that person's estate. And then this is just that additional information on not being able to be allowable for creditors to put a claim on an ABLE account, not liable to attachment, levy, garnishment, or legal process. And there's the various Florida statutes that relate to that. And they're exempt from federal bankruptcy. So that's pretty cool. And just questions to ask, ask your clients if you're dealing with a situation where an individual may benefit from an ABLE account. Here are some things to ask. Do they want to save without losing government benefits, right? That's an easy one. But maybe they want to also use that to pay for housing expenses and not have their SSI check reduced. Tax-free earnings, right? That's a huge win to be able to and like I said, our performance, or like Rachel said, our performance is on our website, and historically some of these accounts have gained 10, 15%, so that's a significant amount year over year. Family and friends can help financially without worrying about jeopardizing somebody's benefits. And then finally, one of the big ones we see in a lot of these hopefully organizational rep pays that we're working with, especially with the stimulus funds that have come in, is their checking accounts now over $2,000, and they have in 1 year from when they get those stimulus monies to get it spent, or they're going to lose their benefits. So people are starting to utilize ABLE accounts to park that extra funds until it's needed. So good thing to know. But with that, here is the course information. So if you are utilizing this for CE credit, and I will read this out just in case you're joining by phone only. The course number you will need is 2100007N. So that's 2100007N. So Rachel, why don't you wrap this up for us? How can people get a hold of us?
Yeah, so we are always available, as we like to say. So we're online at ableunited.com. We also have a live chat function in the bottom right-hand corner of our website. And we're also excited because we recently launched a new Spanish resources page for individuals who, of course, speak Spanish. And so that can be found at ableunited.com/Espanol. We're also available toll free, so you can give us a call Monday through Friday, 9 until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, as I mentioned, John and I are also available for Able office hours. So if individuals ever have questions, they can visit us on our website and hit the events tab and see when we are available to book a 15-minute session. But thank you all really for spending your Wednesday afternoon with us. Knowledge is power, and we hope that you can take this information back to the clients that you serve and have them, start saving for a better life experience. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.